All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. Thursdays are always wild and crazy. Jacob Albrock, Tommy Castor. We welcome back in Paul Savage here in our second hour. Glad to be with you, whether it's on KFH, on the radio, on our video streams, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. All available for you right now. IHOP hotline is open here. 869-1240 is that number to call. Fellas, let's look ahead to tonight's Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. The Eastern Conference Finals delivered, much like the Western Conference Finals in Game 1. I think we expected it out of the Western Conference Finals, and I would expect it again tonight. We've had a little more time to digest it, Tommy, yesterday on, who feels better after Game 1? Obviously, Denver won the game, so they feel good, but the Lakers aren't worried. Doesn't it feel like there's some pressure on Denver tonight to win this Game 2? As tight as Game 1 was, despite the fact that Denver offensively played lights out for most of that game, they don't want to give up home court advantage here, right? It feels pretty daunting to me for them to pick up this win. If the Lakers get the 1-1 split here, I think there's reason for concern if you're Denver.
I don't want to go that far. We've been heaping on pressure over and over and over again on Denver. And every time we heap pressure on them, and say, man, their backs are up against the wall, or we're not sure they're going to be able to do it. All they've done is just handle their business and win. That's what they do. They handle their business, they go to work, and they get victories. And there's a reason why they're the 1 seed in the West. There's a reason why, I think that they will be the NBA champion when it's all said and done. So of course, there's pressure. You're at home. You want to go up 2-0 before you hit the road to LA. I totally understand that. But I think that the overall pressure is less tonight than it was going into Game 1. They needed to get Game 1. They needed to jump ahead 1-0. Losing that first game at home, that would have been disastrous for Denver. But I'm not ready to say there's more pressure or even the same amount of pressure on their shoulders right now going into Game 2 as there was in Game 1.
And I asked that question. It is sort of a silly exercise. There's probably equitable pressure every time at this level, at this stage, and with this on the line, Paul, that, the pressure exists for both teams because they're both trying to win every game. Do you look for trends in this series now, Paul, after seeing Game 1, or should we just attack this thing like as a series, like of one game, a series of one game series, right? Because I think trends are sort of out the window from what we saw in Game 1, because what we thought might be trends didn't really manifest the way that we thought they would. So can we just take this as one game and not worry too much about the big picture here and just treat it that way?
I think you're onto something there. Every game's an individual war. So this is basically 7 wars that will all be played within, a 10 or 15-day period of time. So, every game is going to be a war. There's film. There's knowledge about the other team. Every game that you play, you learn something about the strengths, the weaknesses of the other team. And here's the problem. If you are playing a team like the Lakers and you're Denver, the problem is this is a team you had them down by 20 plus points, and you let them back to within 3 several times. That's a worry. That's a worry. So you make those adjustments. You figure out what you do. Is Denver the better team? Well, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But I mean, you sure have some star power with the Lakers. Now, how old that is, how fragile that star power is, AD is basically not game to game. He's a trip up the floor to trip up the floor. That's where AD is. So I kind of still think it's a Denver deal to lose. But, boy, nothing would surprise me. You got a guy like LeBron who is basically willing this team on his back. I don't know, but I would go with Denver as well. And, of course, with Miami, man, I'll tell you what, give those guys props. Give those guys props with what they're doing at this point. I'm not sure I had them in the finals, let alone winning the finals and going to the NBA championship. But, man, it's a possibility. It's a possibility because the way the Celtics played, or I should say the way the Celtics were forced to play because of the way the Miami Heat played, is a thing of beauty. It's a thing to it's why we watch these games at this time of the year. but they're still coaching. They're still adjusting. There's all kinds of things going on. Advantage Denver. I hate to say this because I think, Tommy, you are on the Celtics still. I think I'm kind of with Jacob. I think I'm kind of switching over to Miami. I think they may have the advantage.
You know what's interesting, Tommy? Like, are we giving the Lakers enough credit for
No.
just how unreal it is that they're here? They had essentially the same regular season record as Miami. We had them dead to rights before the trade deadline. And I think it's because they have LeBron James on the team and to some degree Anthony Davis that we're not giving them the same sort of credit that Miami's getting right now and just how unlikely this run is as far as seeding and regular season, but it's on par, right? And we almost have and again, I think it's because of the star power, but we all talked about it before these series started. Like, we were more excited about the Western Conference Finals, but you have an almost identical dynamic that exists both places, right? Denver, Boston, two regular season juggernauts going up against teams that we didn't even know if they'd be playoff teams who have gotten hot at the right time. I mean, it is almost identical. And in Miami and the Lakers have had equally impressive runs to get to this point. I don't know that the Lakers are getting the same sort of underdog credit that Miami's getting at this point.
Well, because the Lakers, just by virtue of who they are, who's on their roster, the market they're in, where they're located, their brand identity, all of that, it's really, really difficult to characterize the Lakers as underdogs. It doesn't matter who they're playing. It doesn't matter. I mean, literally, because they are the Lakers, it's really hard to have, in the same breath, say the Lakers and underdogs at the same time. So, but perception is reality, right? So it doesn't necessarily always matter what the seeding is or, how it happened in the regular season or whatever. It's really hard, to characterize them as underdogs, even though their seeding would say that they are and the way that they played, has been.
Yeah, Tommy, hold on just a second here, buddy. Look, you got a team that barely made it into the playoffs. They are an underdog. They are a 7th seed. Tommy, this is a team that most people halfway through the season thought would never even make the playoffs. This is an underdog.
With a couple geriatric superstars leading the way.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, but look, I think that there is a lot, and I'm not, discounting the effort that the Lakers made after the trade deadline to get into the playoffs. But the team that they were at the beginning of the season and the team that they are now are two completely different teams, right? And so, you take the overall body of work into play. But I would say that, and we talked about this before, Jacob, that where the Lakers stand right now in the playoffs, they were incredibly underseeded out of 7. Now, again, that's the overall body of work at play. That's what they did at the beginning of the year before the trade deadline when it was a mess, right? But the way the roster is built right now, if they had that roster from day one and they played the way that they are now at the beginning of the season, they're not a 7 seed. So I think that comes into it, right? Don't you think?
Is Miami an 8 seed under the same circumstance, right? Like I
Did
think
Miami go out and make, all the changes that the Lakers made at the trade deadline?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Did they make moves? I don't know. I just know what we're seeing now is, it looks like they were pretty quiet at the trade deadline. I think it's what makes the NBA so difficult. The regular season and the postseason are such different things, right? What we see in the regular season and what we see in the postseason are such different things. And I think the reality of the situation is the Lakers and the Heat are probably not as far behind the field as perception is playing itself out.
Look, on top of that, also, we talked about it in the first hour about, what would happen if a 7 and an 8 seed faced off in the NBA Finals. But I think we can take it a step further and say that in the NBA, probably more than any other sport in the playoffs, the seeding is probably more irrelevant in the NBA playoffs.
But it hasn't always been that way.
You're right, but I'm saying right now the seeding is more irrelevant than any other playoffs in professional sports, right?
Maybe.
Like we're talking about, because I agree with you that the Lakers and the Heat are not as far behind the 1 and 2 and whatever. Like there's more parity there, than I think there used to be when you get down to the bottom seeds. So I think that really I think you have to throw seeding out the window because of the way that teams are dealing with load management and all of that. Like the regular season doesn't matter as much.
So this is an interesting point. A quick search in a site called Fadeaway World in a story that they did last year. They did the champions by seed, and the number one seed of the NBA playoffs, win one conference or the other, has won the title historically 67% of the time. The number 2 seed, another 21%.
Wow.
So after that, 3 seeds or lower have only won titles. Again, this is according to Fadeaway World, and this is a quick search, so I'm going to trust them here for the sake of this discussion happening on the Spur. 10% of the time. 10% of the time. That's it, historically, that lower than a 2 seed has won an NBA title. So my problem for a long time in the NBA was in the postseason that the first 2 rounds sort of felt irrelevant, right? Like, what are we even wasting our time with these first 2 rounds? At least the first round. But that is not the case. And I don't know how long it's felt this way to me. Probably since, I think 3, maybe 4 years now, where I just remember watching, and it was Donovan Mitchell that really jumped off the screen. It was the year Utah and Phoenix jumped off the screen with these young stars, and I'm like, man, some of these teams with these young stars are really good, and you could see a path. It was Booker and Mitchell, I believe. So maybe they're coming out parties in that postseason, and it was sort of the shift away from the Warriors super team. So it was right there in that sweet spot. And I think we're seeing an evolution in the NBA, and I don't know whether it has to do with load management in the regular season, watering that down, where the truly great teams don't seem as great by the records like they always have because stars sit out so often now in the NBA. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's an off year. I don't know.
That's part of it. I think it's load management. It's load management, number 1. And then I also think it's tanking, number 2. Like, I think you've got some skewed records when you've got teams. Dallas was the team that everybody pointed at this season because they were fairly open about it, right?
Yeah, they tanked 1 game.
But what I'm saying is that I think that there are some skewed records because of both of those things, where that's where you're seeding the playoffs based on your regular season record. Is it really accurate? Do you feel confident? And I don't know. I mean, look at where we are in both conference finals. A 7 seed is in one and an 8 seed is in the other. It's not a bad thing, but I'm just not sure that seeding is incredibly accurate. And this might be a trend in years to come in the NBA.
Well, their records show what the trend should be. I mean, and where they should be seated. And by the way, Chelsea, who we our guru when it comes to betting and all things that are betting, would probably be chastising us at this very moment for taking or picking a team that's ranked 7th or ranked 3rd or 8th in the seeding process for this championship. She'd look at this and say, and I'm so appreciative you found that site right in the middle of this conversation, Jacob, with regards to only 10% of teams from a 3 seed or down have won a championship in the NBA. That's gold.
I'm pretty sure she's taking the Heat.
No.
Didn't
She is taking the Heat. So,
Yeah.
so the trend, and she is trends, and betting is trends, and I think the trends are showing now that.
Well, hold on.
Like you gotta almost start a second season here and look at the Heat, not based on the regular season, but based on this postseason.
Smart money was taken opposite that, though. I mean, and you can have trends, and trends are a funny thing. Trends can be emotional. Trends can be, they can be basically whatever you want it to be. But
That's you say it's funny. You say it's emotional, but both of you guys are like, well, after game 1, we're going to lean on the Heat, and I'm the one that's saying the Celtics are they're still the number 1 seed for a reason, right? Number 2 seed for a reason.
Yeah, but the Heat have taken down the 1 seed and just keep doing this. So at some point, it's like, all right, you can slam me in the head with it as many times as you want. The Heat, if they keep getting 8.5 points the way they're
I'm
playing.
clearly the only logical one. I'm the only one that's saying, yeah, the chalk is still probably the play with
but
both
is
Miami.
the chalk the play? Is the chalk the play if you're going to give 8.5 points?
I think in game 2, yeah. I think Boston is pretty pissed off after game 1. I'm leaning the chalk on. I'm leaning the chalk on both series right now, to be honest with you.
I don't know what to do. I don't know. I haven't been betting them because I've been so wrong in trying to predict outcomes and margins and all those things. Like I'm not
the only logical one on this show. Who would have thought it?
Logical one, Jacob.
There's no logic.
Tommy.
There's a 7 and an 8 seed in the conference finals. That's not logical. Logic tells you that they shouldn't be there. It is what it is. I don't know why.
Logic tells you that the chalk should beat both the 7 and the 8 pretty handily.
They should. Will they? I'm with you in half of it. I think we're gonna have. I think I'm starting to consider a Denver Heat game 1 winner. No. I don't know what to do. We'll find out after tonight. I reserve the right to change my mind every day on the show throughout the conference playoffs. Let's come back and wrap this thing up. We'll tell you what's on tap today as Sports Daily finishes on a Thursday.